The alley devoured the night's shadows, but it couldn't swallow the glint of a knife, or the choked, rag gas that escaped Jamal's lips as he saw death unfold. Jamal, 10, crouched behind a rusted dumpster, his worn sneakers sinking into the cold, sticky mud, his dark eyes widening in terror as a man in a gray hoodie plunged a blade into another's chest. Blood sprayed. A grocery bag hit the ground, apples rolling like crimson marbles across the grime, and the victim, a gray-haired man with kind eyes, crumpled with a groan that haunts nightmares. In that heart-stopping, breathless instant, Jamal's world flipped. He wasn't just a scavenger kid hunting scraps anymore. He was a witness to murder, a spark in a powder keg of crime, and the weight of that bloody truth crashed down on his small, trembling frame like a freight train roaring through the dark. Jamal Carter lived on the frayed edge of Carver Heights, a forgotten slum where the streets sagged under neglect, streetlights flickered like dying stars, and the air carried the sour tang of rust and despair. He was small for 10, wiry and quick, his dark skin perpetually smudged with dirt from days spent scavenging. Cans, bottles, bits of wire, anything he could trade for a crumpled dollar to ease the burden on his mom. Lila, a single seamstress whose fingers bled from stitching late into the night to keep them from starvation. Their home was a crumbling tenement, a single room with peeling walls, no heat, no fridge, just a thin mattress they shared under a cracked window that whistled with every gust, the wind a cruel reminder of a world that didn't care. But Jamal didn't complain. He had Lila's crooked smile, her quiet grit, and a knack for finding treasure in trash piles, a skill born of necessity in a life where every penny was a prayer. That humid July night, he'd slipped out after Lila's snores filled their cramped room, her exhaustion a soft rhythm against the distant wail of sirens that punctuated Carver Heights like a heartbeat. The alley behind Mr. Patel's corner store was a secret gold mine. Discarded cans glinted like silver in the moonlight, a lifeline for tomorrow's meal. But tonight, it was a trap snapping shut. He ducked behind the dumpster when he heard footsteps, sharp and uneven, his breath catching in his throat as two men emerged from the gloom. One in a gray hoodie, lean and twitchy, his hood shadowing a face taut with menace. The other older, hunched, clutching a grocery bag, his gray hair catching the faint glow of a flickering bulb. "You owe me, old man," the hoodie snarled, his voice low and jagged like broken glass. And before Jamal could blink, the knife flashed, a swift, brutal arc sinking into the older man's chest with a sickening thud that echoed in the boy's skull. Blood sprayed, apples tumbled from the bag, rolling red against the filth, and the man fell, his groan fading into a silence that pressed against Jamal's ears like a vice. The killer bolted, hoodie flapping, vanishing into the night, leaving Jamal frozen, his heart pounding so hard it hurt, his small hands clutching a dented, like it could shield him from the horror, soaking into his bones. Jamal didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the tenement was the killer's boots crunching gravel, every shadow the knife's glint slicing through the dark. His mom stirred at dawn, her tired eyes narrowing as she saw his ashen face, the sweat beading on his brow despite the morning chill. "What's wrong, baby?" Lila asked, her voice soft but sharp with a mother's instinct, her hands pausing mid-stitch, the needle glinting in the dim light like a tiny blade. Jamal shook his head, lips sealed tight. He couldn't burden her, not when her fingers were raw from sewing, not when rent loomed like a guillotine over their fragile existence, not when she'd already lost too much to keep him safe. But the secret gnawed at him, a jagged stone lodged in his gut, and the alley's blood haunted his every step, staining his thoughts with a crimson he couldn't scrub clean. By noon, Carver Heights buzzed with cops, blue lights flashing like cold stars, radios crackling with static, the store cordoned off with yellow tape that fluttered like a warning in the breeze. Jamal watched from a stoop across the street, his hoodie pulled low over his eyes, his small frame hunched as Detective Rawls, a white man in his 30s with a buzz cut and a smirk that curled like a snake, barked orders to a rookie cop. Another transient, probably a drug deal gone sour, Rawls muttered, dismissing the dead man's life with a shrug, his voice dripping with a casual disdain that made Jamal's stomach churn. He'd seen Rawls before, cruising past their building, ignoring Lila's calls about break-ins with a sneer. What did you expect in this dump? The cops didn't care. Not about Carver Heights, not about folks like him and his mom, not about a dead man whose apples now rotted in the alley. But that face, the victim's gray, kind features wrinkled like Grandpa's, eyes that had twinkled when he slipped Jamal a quarter at Patel's with a wink, stuck with him, a ghost he couldn't shake. He didn't deserve that, Jamal thought, the stone in his gut sharpening into a blade of guilt and anger, cutting deeper with every beat of his heart. He had to tell someone, but who'd believe a skinny black kid from the projects, a scavenger with holes in his shoes, and a mom who couldn't pay the light bill? The weight pressed harder, a crushing load on his narrow shoulders, and his small hands balled into fists, nails digging into his palms as he wrestled with a fear he couldn't name. That afternoon, Jamal lingered near the tape, kicking a pebble with his scuffed sneaker, his hoodie shadowing his face as he watched the cops mill about like buzzards over carrion. Rawls spotted him, his smirk tightening into a scowl as he strode over, boots thudding on the cracked pavement. "Hey, kid, beat it. You're clogging my scene," he snapped, his voice sharp with irritation, his hand twitching toward his belt. Jamal's heart raced, a frantic drumbeat in his chest, but the ghost of the alley pushed words past his fear, spilling out in a rush. "I saw it. I saw who did it," he blurted, his voice cracking, his small frame trembling as the confession hung in the air like smoke. Rawls froze, his eyes narrowing to slits, suspicion flickering behind his smirk as he grabbed Jamal's arm with a grip that bruised, dragging him toward a cruiser parked crookedly on the curb. "Don't waste my damn time, boy. Spill it quick or scram," he growled, shoving Jamal against the car's sun-warmed metal, the cold steel of authority pressing into the boy's back. Jamal's voice shook, thin and high as he spilled the truth. The gray hoodie, the knife flashing, the apples rolling free in the blood-soaked mud, the killer's fleeting glimpse of sharp jaw and hollow cheeks under the hood. Rawls leaned close, his breath hot with coffee and disdain, his smirk widening into something predatory. "You sure about that, kid? Lying gets your kind in deep shit around here. Juvie ain't no picnic." Jamal nodded, swallowing the lump of fear clogging his throat, his small frame rigid with a defiance he didn't know he had. "I ain't lying. I saw his face. I swear it," he said, his voice steadying with every word, his dark eyes locking Rawls with a flicker of steel. Rawls scribbled on a notepad, his pen scratching lazily, half listening as he muttered, "Probably some crackhead's dream. Don't mean squat." He waved Jamal off with a flick of his wrist, turning back to his crew with a laugh. "Kids got stories. Ought to write books, not waste my day." Jamal stumbled away, fury flaring in his chest like a match struck against stone. "He don't care. Don't believe me." The dismissal cutting deeper than the alley's blood. That night, he slipped back to the scene, heart pounding like a drum in his ears, his sneakers silent on the wet pavement as he crept behind the dumpster. His small hands brushed the rusted edge, and there it was, a torn gray sleeve snagged on a jagged bolt, missed by the cop's careless sweep. He clutched it, the fabric rough against his fingers, a shard of truth he couldn't let go, a key he didn't know how to turn but wouldn't dare drop. The next day, whispers spread through Carver Heights like wildfire. A witness had come forward, a kid from the projects. Mrs. Patel, the store owner with her sari fluttering in the breeze, cornered Jamal outside her shop, her brown eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope, her voice trembling as she gripped his shoulder. "Was it you, Jamal? That man, Mr. Henry, was good. Always tipped me extra. Tell me." Jamal nodded, clutching the sleeve in his pocket, its weight as secret burning against his thigh, and her eyes widened, tears brimming. "Take it to the cops. Don't let him die, for nothing, please," she pleaded, her voice cracking with a grief that mirrored his own. Jamal marched to the station, the sleeve of coal searing his small hand, his sneakers scuffing the cracked sidewalk with every determined step, but Rawls met him at the door with a sneer that twisted his gut. "Back again, huh? What's this, your little rag?" he mocked, snatching the sleeve with a scoff, his fingers brushing the fabric dismissively. Jamal thrust it forward, his voice cracking with a desperate edge. "It's the killer's. From the alley. I found it." Rawls' smirk faltered, his eyes narrowing as he barked for a tech, his voice sharp with sudden unease. "Bag it, run it now." Hours crawled by, Jamal pacing the station's grimy hall, his heart a frantic drumbeat, until Rawls stormed back, face grim, his smirk gone cold. "Prince Matchapunk, Dwayne Ellis, priors for assault." "How'd you get this, kid?" he demanded, his voice a growl that sent a shiver down Jamal's spine. Jamal squared his narrow shoulders, fear swallowed by a resolve that hardened his small frame, his dark eyes flashing with a fire he hadn't known he carried. "I went back. I knew you wouldn't look," he said, his voice steady now, cutting through Rawls' disbelief like a blade through fog. Rawls glared, his fists clenching, but a new cop, Detective Maria Lopez, a Latina with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense stride, stepped in, her badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. "Ease up, Rawls. He's a damn hero, not a suspect," she snapped, her voice firm as she knelt to meet Jamal's gaze, her brown eyes softening with a respect he'd never seen from a cop. "You're brave, kid, braver than most. Tell me everything, every detail." That night, the storm broke. Dwayne's shadow crept closer. Jamal woke to a creak outside their window, his breath hitching as he peeked through the crack. A gray hoodie hovered in the alley, hood up, eyes glinting under streetlight, searching. His small heart slammed against his ribs, a frantic beat as he clutched the mattress. Lila's snores a fragile shield against the terror clawing his chest. "He knows. He's coming for me," Jamal thought, the stone in his gut turning to ice, his hands trembling as he pressed against the wall, praying the dark would hide him. Lopez took charge. Jamal's halting story, the torn sleeve, and Patel's tearful tip painted a trail to Dwayne Ellis. She grilled Jamal, her pen flying across a notepad, her voice steady but urgent. "You're sure about the face?" Sharp jaw, hollow cheeks. Jamal nodded, his small voice gaining strength. "Yeah, he looked right at me when he ran." Lopez's eyes flashed, and she radioed her team, her tone clipped. "Gray hoodie, mid-20s, Dwayne Ellis, priors for assault. Move now." By dusk, they nabbed him. A dive bar raid. Dwayne cornered with the knife still in his pocket, blood traces damning him under Lopez's flashlight. Rawls grumbled, arms crossed, his buzz cut bristling. "Lucky break, kid's a pest." Lopez shot back, her voice steel. "This pest solve your case. Credit where it's due, Rawls." The news hit Carver Heights like a thunderclap. Mr. Henry's killer caught, a scavenger kid the key, his name whispered in awe. But Dwayne's shadow didn't fade, it struck back. Late that night, as Lila hugged Jamal tight, her tears streaking her exhausted face. "You're my brave boy. I'm so proud." A window shattered downstairs, glass raining like a scream through the tenement. Jamal bolted upright, heart racing, as boots thudded up the stairs. Dwayne's brother Trey, 30, a hulking figure with a shaved head and a bat swinging in his fist, his eyes wild with vengeance. "You snitchin' rat. Where you at?" he bellowed, his voice a roar that shook the thin walls. Lila shoved Jamal behind her, her sewing scissors trembling in her hand, her voice a fierce cry. "Get out! Leave my boy alone!" Jamal darted for the fire escape, his small frame slipping through the window as Trey's bat splintered their door. Lila's scream piercing his ears. "Run, Jamal!" Her voice a lifeline snapping taut. He stumbled down the rusted ladder, mud splashing his sneakers, heart pounding as Trey's boots clanged above, the bat swinging with a whoosh that grazed his hoodie. He sprinted through alleys, lungs burning, tears streaking his dirt-smudged face, until Lopez's cruiser screeched around a corner, her flashlight blinding Trey as she tackled him, cuffs snapping tight. "You're done. Punk, stay away from that kid," she snarled, her voice a whip as Jamal collapsed, sobbing, relief crashing over him like a wave. Lila pulled Jamal into her arms as cops swarmed their building, Trey hauled off in cuffs, his curses fading into the night. "You're safe, baby. I've got you," she whispered, her voice breaking, her raw hands cradling his face as tears mixed with his own. Malik, his older cousin, ruffled his hair, grinning through worry. Little man's a legend, tough as hell. Lopez lingered, handing him a candy bar, her sharp eyes softening. You did good, Jamal. Saved us a mess. You're braver than most grown men I know. He split it with Lila, the sweetness a rare balm on a night that had nearly broken him. Weeks later, Jamal walked Carver Heights taller, sneakers still ragged but chin high, whispers trailing him. That's the kid who caught the killer. The tenement remained cold, the mattress thin, but a warmth settled in his chest. His small hands had shifted something, a ripple in a world that often overlooked him. Yet the alley lingered in his dreams. Apples rolling, the knife's flash, Trey's bat swinging, a shadow he couldn't outrun. He'd seen, he'd spoken, and he'd survived. And that was a start, a spark that burned through the dark, lighting a path he'd never dared imagine.